The weight of the unseen. Our first story comes from a Reddit user named Trailblazer78, who shared his account in the r/Let's Not Meet subreddit. This happened to him a few years back deep in the Appalachian Mountains, during what was supposed to be a peaceful solo backpacking trip. Trailblazer78, or Mark, as we'll call him, was an experienced hiker. He'd done dozens of multi-day trips, priding himself on his self-sufficiency, his rigorous preparation, and his ability to navigate even the most remote sections of wilderness. This particular trip was a week-long trek through a less-traveled section of a national forest, far from popular trails. He loved the solitude, the feeling of being completely alone with nature. A true test of his survival skills and his connection to the wild. The first few days were idyllic. Clear skies, crisp air that smelled of pine and damp earth, and the satisfying rhythm of his boots on the leaf-strewn ground. He saw deer, a black bear cub, from a safe distance, thankfully without its mother, and heard the calls of countless birds. He felt connected to the ancient earth, untroubled by the constant hum and digital static of modern life. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call was a familiar comfort. It was on the fourth day that things started to shift. Mark had set up his camp near a small, gurgling stream, surrounded by ancient, towering oaks, whose branches intertwined like gnarled fingers against the sky. As dusk settled, he noticed the sudden, profound absence of natural sounds. The birds that had been chirping just moments before were silent. The cicadas, usually a buzzing chorus that filled the air, had quieted. Even the stream seemed to dim its murmur, its usual babble reduced to a faint, hesitant trickle. It was an unnatural silence, heavy and oppressive, like a thick, damp blanket thrown over the entire forest, muffling every sound, every whisper of life. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring, a vacuum that felt profoundly wrong. He initially dismissed it as just an odd moment. Sometimes nature just goes quiet. But as he cooked his dinner over a small, carefully managed fire, the feeling began to solidify. He felt watched. It wasn't the casual observation of a deer or the cautious curiosity of another bear. This was a different sensation, a cold prickle on the back of his neck that suggested intelligence, malevolence even. It felt like a deliberate, focused gaze. He scanned the tree line, his headlamp sweeping across the dark woods, its beams swallowed by the deepening gloom, but saw nothing. Just the endless, looming silhouettes of trees, now appearing more like silent, hulking sentinels. He tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to isolation or an overactive imagination, ate his meal quickly, and retreated into his tent. He zipped up the fly, pulled out his book, and tried to read. But the feeling persisted, an almost physical pressure against the thin nylon walls of his tent. It felt like something was just outside, standing perfectly still, utterly motionless, watching his tent. He lay there, rigid, every muscle tense, listening. The silence was still there, broken only by the frantic thump of his own heart against his ribs. Then he heard it, a faint snap of a twig. It came from directly behind his tent, not far, maybe 10 feet away. His breath hitched in his throat. He knew the sounds of the forest intimately. This wasn't an animal. It was too deliberate, too heavy, like a single, slow, cautious step, a weight being shifted. He held his breath, straining his ears, trying to discern any further sound over the roar of blood in his ears. Nothing, just the profound, suffocating silence. He desperately told himself it was an animal, a deer, anything that could be explained by the natural world. But his gut screamed otherwise. Minutes stretched into an eternity. He finally managed to convince himself it was his imagination, that the isolation was getting to him, playing tricks on his mind. He was just about to try and force himself to sleep when he heard it again. This time, it wasn't a snap. It was a faint, almost imperceptible scrape, like something heavy being dragged, slowly, deliberately, over the fallen leaves. And it was moving, not directly away, but around his tent. A slow, methodical, deliberate circle. The sound was low, continuous, a soft rasping that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath him. His blood ran cold. He clutched his small utility knife, his knuckles white, the plastic handle digging into his palm. He could feel the presence now, a palpable weight pressing in on his tent from all sides. He felt its eyes on him, even through the thin fabric, a predatory focus that made his skin crawl. He imagined something impossibly tall, dark, and utterly motionless, its form barely discernible in the inky blackness, circling him in the dead of night. He pictured it moving with an unnerving slowness, an almost intelligent patience, as if assessing, testing, or simply enjoying his terror. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound. He just lay there, rigid, paralyzed by a primal fear he'd never known. The scraping sound continued, almost rhythmic, for what felt like an hour, perhaps more. Each slow drag, each rustle of leaves, painted a terrifying picture in his mind. What was it? What was it doing? Was it trying to find an opening? Was it just observing? Was it waiting for him to make a mistake, to emerge? He didn't dare to unzip his tent, didn't dare to look. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to stay still, to remain hidden. He just squeezed his eyes shut, trying to make himself as small and invisible as possible, wishing he could simply vanish. Eventually, the sound stopped. The scraping ceased. The profound silence returned, but it felt even heavier now, charged with unseen menace, a lingering residue of the entity's presence. Mark didn't know if it had left or if it was just standing still, waiting, perfectly silent. He stayed awake the entire night, listening to the phantom sounds, feeling the weight of the unseen presence just beyond the thin barrier of his tent, the air thick with unspoken dread. When the first sliver of dawn finally broke through the tree canopy, casting long, weak shadows that seemed to stretch and writhe, Mark slowly, cautiously unzipped his tent. He emerged, utility knife still clutched in his trembling hand, scanning the area with desperate eyes. There was nothing. No footprints in the soft earth, no disturbed leaves, no broken branches. Nothing to indicate anything had been there at all. The forest looked exactly as it had the day before, pristine and untouched. But the feeling, the oppressive weight, it was still there. He could almost taste it in the air, a metallic tang of fear and something ancient. The lack of any physical trace only amplified the horror. making it feel more supernatural, more deliberate. He packed his camp in a frenzy, his hands fumbling, skipping breakfast entirely. He was out of there before the sun was fully up, walking faster than he ever had, not daring to look back, every shadow seeming to hold a lurking form. He didn't stop until he reached the trailhead, practically running the last few miles, his lungs burning, his legs aching, but driven by an overwhelming need to escape. Mark never went back to that section of the woods. He still hikes, but never alone, and never in places quite so remote. He says the memory of that night, the feeling of being circled by something unknowable, something intelligent and patient, still haunts his dreams. The sheer terror of feeling an intelligence observing him, the deliberate slowness of its movements, and the absolute lack of any physical trace. It's a fear that stays with you, the weight of the unseen.